Imagine this: a small group of 300 Crusaders, outnumbered and on the brink of defeat, face an army that outmatches them in size and power. The Seljuks think they've won before the battle even begins, but what happens next defies logic. With a plan so bold and a will so fierce, these Crusaders turn the tide of battle, leaving a shattered Seljuk army in their wake. By the end of this story, you'll understand how courage, strategy, and sheer will can change history forever. The year is 1119. In the vast, sun-scorched plains of Anatolia, 300 Crusaders find themselves standing on the brink of oblivion. The Seljuk Turks, led by their seasoned commanders, number more than $20,000, a massive, unyielding force. Their cavalry, clad in iron and steel, is a nightmare of history, undefeated and merciless. The Crusaders, weary from months of battle, are barely holding on. They are outnumbered, outclassed, and isolated in a foreign land, surrounded by an enemy that seems poised to crush them. The battlefield stretches out before them, dry and unforgiving. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and the heat of a Mediterranean sun that feels like it's pressing down on their very souls. The Crusaders have no reinforcements, no supplies, and their chances of survival seem slim, to say the least. They are far from home, far from the support of their fellow knights. Every soldier knows that this could be their last stand. But amidst the overwhelming despair, there's a spark, a glimmer of hope. Their leader, a man not of noble birth, but one with a sharp mind and an unyielding will, has a plan. His name is Bertrand, a knight not known for feats of strength or bravery, but for his cunning. His mind works like a weapon, sharper than any blade, calculating the odds with a precision that few can rival. "We don't fight them on their terms," Bertrand says, standing tall before his men. His voice cuts through the air, steady and confident. "We make the fight ours. We use what they don't expect, and we strike when they believe they've already won." The soldiers exchange skeptical glances. They've faced many battles, many wars, but none this daunting. Some are ready to flee, some ready to die in battle. But Bertrand's words ignite a fire in them, something primal and fierce. He gives a simple order. "We will split them, divide their army, and force them to chase us through the hills. We'll use the terrain to our advantage. They will be overconfident. That will be their downfall." They look out over the Seljuk camp, a sprawling mass of tents, banners, and men, all seemingly unaware of the small, outnumbered force that is about to change everything. The Crusaders know their chances are slim, but if there's any hope, it's in Bertrand's plan, a plan that depends on their absolute trust in one another and their ability to turn the tide through sheer audacity. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dry earth, the Crusaders prepare for the impossible. They gather what little strength they have left, the quiet murmur of prayer and determination filling the air. But what they don't know, what they can't yet see, is that this night, this seemingly hopeless night, will become the moment that reshapes the course of history. The battle they are about to face is not one of overwhelming force. It's one of strategy, of turning what should be their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The Seljuk army may be larger, more powerful, and better equipped, but they don't have the one thing the Crusaders do: the will to fight when all seems lost. What do you think would have happened if the Crusaders had failed? Would history have been different? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that will make you rethink history. The Crusaders stand at the edge of the battlefield, their armor dulled by the dust and sweat of their long march. The Seljuks, vast and overwhelming, are camped just across the plain, unaware that the 300 Crusaders are about to make their move. The heat of the midday sun makes the air shimmer like a mirage. To the Crusaders, it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath, as if even nature knows the odds they face. Bertrand, their leader, surveys the terrain with a sharp gaze. The land is unforgiving, a mixture of dry hills, deep ravines, and narrow passes. It's an ancient battlefield, one that has seen the rise and fall of many empires. The land itself whispers secrets of past warriors, and Bertrand knows he must use it to his advantage. The Crusaders are not just fighting the Seljuks, they are fighting history itself, standing on the bones of those who failed before them. Remember, we are not just fighting men. We are fighting an idea, Bertrand says, his voice low, carrying only to the nearest ears. The Seljuks believe they are unbeatable, that their numbers alone make them invincible, but arrogance will be their downfall. He points to the hills that surround the battlefield. We'll take those ridges. From there, we'll strike, retreat, and strike again. They'll think we're running. They'll chase us into the hills, and once they're divided, we'll strike with all we have. His plan relies on speed and deception, two things the Crusaders have in abundance, but the Seljuks do not. The Crusaders may be outnumbered, but they know how to fight on their terms. They've fought in the shadows before. They've learned to use the terrain as an ally, and tonight it will be their greatest weapon. The men begin to take their positions, moving quietly and efficiently. Every movement is precise. The Seljuk forces remain oblivious, their commanders too focused on their superiority to notice the threat lurking just over the horizon. Bertrand's heart pounds in his chest, but his mind is clear. He knows this battle will not be won by brute force. It will be won by outsmarting an army that believes victory is certain. As the first shadows of dusk fall over the battlefield, the Crusaders prepare to make their move. The wind carries the scent of smoke and steel, a harbinger of the chaos to come. They may be small in number, but they will not go down without a fight. As dusk fades and the stars begin to prick the sky, the Crusaders quietly prepare to implement their risky strategy. Bertrand's plan hinges on one simple but dangerous idea: deceive the Seljuks into thinking they are weaker than they are. The men are nervous, but they trust Bertrand. He's never led them astray before. The Crusaders move out in silence, their armor clinking only faintly in the still air. Each knight is assigned a specific task, each movement choreographed like a dance. The entire force will pretend to retreat, drawing the Seljuks into the pursuit. The plan is simple, almost too simple, but therein lies its brilliance. The Seljuks, so accustomed to crushing smaller forces in direct combat, will not anticipate this kind of tactical maneuver. Bertrand gathers his commanders in a quiet huddle. When we pull back, we'll make it look like chaos. We'll give them what they want, make them think victory is already within their grasp. We lead them into the hills, and once they're there, we strike. He pauses, eyes scanning the men around him. We're not fighting them head-on. We're pulling them into our domain, a smaller battlefield, a place where they'll lose their edge. One of the Crusader captains, a veteran named Hugo, speaks up. And when they chase us, they'll split up, won't they? They'll scatter like wolves hunting a wounded deer. That's when we hit them. That's right, Bertrand nods. But timing is everything. If we can break them into groups, we'll isolate them. And that's when we'll cut them down. It's a dangerous game. If the Seljuks don't take the bait, or worse, if they adapt quickly enough, the Crusaders could be surrounded and annihilated. The thought of retreating, of luring a larger force into enemy territory, fills the Crusaders with a sense of dread. But there's no other option. They must rely on their wits, not their numbers. The Crusaders move swiftly, their hearts pounding as they begin their feigned retreat, shouting in mock despair. The Seljuk soldiers notice, and soon their commanders signal to pursue. The trap is set. As the Crusaders begin to disappear into the dark hills, a hushed tension falls over the battlefield. The Seljuks, confident in their victory, begin to advance. Little do they know, they are about to walk straight into a trap. The Crusaders retreat further into the hills, moving like shadows in the fading light. Their footsteps are light, controlled, every soldier aware of the delicate nature of the plan. The Seljuks, seeing the small force scattering in disarray, begin to charge forward with increasing confidence. Their cavalry, the pride of the Seljuk army, gallops eagerly toward what they believe is a victory already secured. The Crusaders are now positioned in the hills, hidden by the terrain. They know the Seljuks will be foolish enough to follow, thinking they are pressing an easy advantage. But Bertrand's eyes are on the horizon, tracking the movements of the enemy, waiting for the moment the Seljuk army begins to spread out. Suddenly, the first wave of Seljuk cavalry, a group of reckless scouts, enters the narrow gorge the Crusaders had planned for. It's a perfect trap. Bertrand gives the signal. "Now!" he commands, his voice cutting through the still air. The Crusaders spring from their hiding places, emerging from the shadows like a storm. The first wave of Seljuks is overwhelmed. They never saw it coming. The Crusaders fight with precision, striking swiftly, using the terrain to their advantage. The narrow passes make it impossible for the Seljuks to maneuver their horses effectively, forcing them into cramped spaces where they are vulnerable. The Crusaders use their agility to cut down the enemy's numbers, one strike at a time. But it's not just their numbers that make the Crusaders dangerous, it's their strategy. Every move is calculated. Every man knows his role, knows when to strike and when to fall back. They feign another retreat, luring more of the Seljuk forces deeper into the narrow gorge. The Seljuks, sensing their prey is slipping away, press harder, but as they push forward, they fall into the trap. Another group of Crusaders emerges from the hills to flank them, trapping the Seljuk cavalry between two forces. The battle erupts into chaos. The Seljuk army, so used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, is now faced with a force that is more elusive, more strategic. Bertrand's plan is working. The Crusaders may be outnumbered, but they are not fighting with brute strength. They are fighting with wit, turning the Seljuks' greatest advantage into their fatal flaw. The battle rages on, and the Seljuk army, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, begins to show signs of panic. The Crusaders, moving with precise coordination, continue to strike and retreat, striking again before the Seljuks can reorganize. The Seljuk cavalry, their greatest asset, is being torn apart by the terrain and the relentless, unpredictable tactics of the Crusaders. Bertrand watches from his position atop a rocky outcrop, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The Seljuks are spreading thinner, their ranks thinning as they chase after the retreating Crusaders. The plan is working, but only just. The Crusaders' position is still precarious, and they are at risk of being overwhelmed if the Seljuks manage to regroup. Then the moment arrives. Bertrand sees the signal. The Seljuk forces have fallen into two groups, one pursuing the Crusaders deeper into the hills, the other still hesitating at the edge of the gorge. The Crusaders have done their job well, luring the Seljuks into a deadly split. With a sharp breath, Bertrand gives the order. Now! Close the trap! The Crusaders, lying in wait, leap into action. From the shadows, they burst forth, flanking the Seljuk forces on both sides. The Seljuks, caught between two relentless attacks, have no time to react. Their command structure begins to collapse. Leaders shout orders, but the sound of their voices is drowned out by the clash of steel. The Seljuks are surrounded. Panic begins to spread. For the first time, the Crusaders see the cracks in the Seljuk armor. The enemy, who had seemed so invincible just hours before, is now faltering. The Crusaders are no longer retreating. They are attacking, relentlessly with precision, every strike a blow against the enemy's morale. It is a turning point. The tide of battle has shifted. The Crusaders' strategy, once considered too risky to succeed, is now unfolding into a decisive victory. The Seljuks, who had expected an easy victory, are now trapped in a nightmare of their own making. The Seljuk forces, once proud and confident, are now a disorganized, fractured army. What had seemed an unbreakable tide of cavalry and soldiers is now reduced to chaos and confusion. The Crusaders, relentless in their pursuit, are pushing deeper into the heart of the Seljuk camp. Bertrand's strategy, once seen as a desperate gamble, has evolved into a brilliant masterpiece of warfare. As the Crusaders charge forward, their swords gleaming in the dim light, the remaining Seljuk soldiers are forced to fight for their lives. Their once pristine ranks have broken down into scattered groups, and their leaders, disoriented and desperate, are struggling to maintain control. The weight of their numbers, which had once seemed so imposing, now becomes their greatest liability. Bertrand's eyes scan the battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest. His men are fighting like lions. The smaller Crusader force is striking with precision, cutting down one group after another, using the terrain to isolate pockets of Seljuk soldiers. The sound of steel on steel echoes across the hills as the battle intensifies. "Push forward!" Bertrand shouts to his men, his voice sharp and commanding. "This is our moment." The Crusaders surge forward, each strike landing with deadly accuracy. Their enemies, once sure of victory, now find themselves on the retreat. The Seljuk commanders, unable to rally their men, are scattered, unable to organize a counterattack. It is in this moment, as the Crusaders press on, that the unthinkable happens. The Seljuk army, once confident in its superiority, begins to break. The first group of soldiers throws down their weapons, surrendering to the Crusaders. Then another, then another. The once mighty Seljuk force, facing the reality of their defeat, crumbles under the pressure. For the Crusaders, it is a moment of glory. The battle, which had seemed impossible mere hours ago, is now theirs to win. The Seljuk forces are defeated, broken and disarrayed, their morale shattered by the relentless and unexpected tactics of the Crusaders. But even as the Crusaders celebrate their hard-earned victory, Bertrand remains vigilant. He knows that while the Seljuks are in retreat, the battle is not yet over. There is still work to be done. Yet for the moment, the Crusaders stand triumphant, their courage and strategic brilliance having turned the tide of the battle in their favor. The Crusaders, emboldened by their success, are now closing in on the last of the Seljuk forces. What had been a desperate fight for survival has turned into a systematic dismantling of the enemy. The once proud Seljuk army, so overwhelming in numbers and strength, now finds itself on the brink of complete collapse. Bertrand surveys the battlefield, his eyes scanning the retreating enemy. The Seljuks, who had been so confident hours ago, are now fragmented and demoralized. Their cavalry is scattered, their infantry in disarray, and their command structure in ruins. It is clear that the Crusaders have gained the upper hand. "We finish this now," Bertrand says to his lieutenants, his voice cold and commanding. The remaining Crusaders are eager for one final push. They know the battle is nearly won, but they also understand the importance of ensuring that no pockets of resistance remain. The Seljuks cannot be allowed to regroup. This victory must be absolute. The Crusaders, though exhausted, are driven by adrenaline and the promise of triumph. They advance toward the heart of the Seljuk camp, where the final pockets of resistance are fighting desperately to hold their ground. The Seljuk warriors are no longer charging forward with the same discipline or ferocity. Instead, they are retreating, trying to flee into the hills. But the Crusaders are too quick. The Crusaders cut through the remnants of the Seljuk forces with ruthless efficiency. Each strike is a calculated blow, each movement deliberate. The Seljuks, still clinging to their weapons, are overwhelmed by the relentless tide of Crusader knights. They have no choice but to surrender or face death. And then, in the heart of the chaos, Bertrand sees it. The Seljuk commanders, their morale shattered, are making a final stand. The time has come to crush the last vestiges of resistance. Bertrand signals his men, and they charge, encircling the last remaining group of Seljuk leaders. The final assault is swift. The Seljuk commanders, overwhelmed and outnumbered, make no attempt to escape. They fight to the last, but it is clear they are doomed. Within minutes, the last of the Seljuk leadership falls, and with them, the hope of a Seljuk victory. The battlefield is eerily quiet now. The once thundering sounds of combat have faded into the stillness, leaving behind only the soft crunch of boots on the dirt and the occasional murmur of the Crusaders as they move through the aftermath. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and the faint, acrid scent of smoke from dying campfires. The Crusaders, though victorious, are far from unscathed. Many are wounded, some grievously. The toll of the battle is evident in the faces of the men, haggard, exhausted, and grim. Yet there is also a sense of triumph, a deep, resonant satisfaction that can only come from achieving the impossible. The Seljuk army, which had once seemed invincible, now lies in ruins. What was once a formidable force is now nothing more than a broken, scattered remnant, fleeing or surrendering to the Crusaders' mercy. The battle has been won, but the victory is bittersweet. The Crusaders know they have given everything they had, and many have paid the ultimate price. Bertrand stands at the crest of a hill, surveying the field below. The Seljuk camp is in disarray, its tents abandoned, their banners torn and scattered in the wind. In the distance, he can see groups of Seljuk survivors limping away, their pride shattered, their morale broken. The Crusaders have not only defeated their enemies, they have shattered their will to fight. But for Bertrand, the victory is not about the glory of the moment. It is about something deeper. His mind races, calculating the consequences of what has just occurred. This battle, though hard won, will be remembered for generations. The Crusaders' strategic brilliance, their audacity in the face of overwhelming odds, has changed the course of history. As the Crusaders begin to gather their wounded, the commanders huddle together. There is no time for celebration just yet. The Seljuk threat has been neutralized, but the Crusaders know their journey is far from over. They have made powerful enemies, and the war is not yet finished. The road ahead will be filled with new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, they stand victorious, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they have done what no one believed possible. The days following the battle are quiet, yet charged with the hum of reflection and the weight of what has been accomplished. The Crusaders, though weary and wounded, gather what remains of their strength to honor the fallen. The camp, once teeming with Seljuk soldiers, is now a place of somber triumph. The men have proven themselves on the battlefield, but the cost is apparent in the silent grief that hangs over their ranks. Bertrand walks through the camp, his boots kicking up dust as he surveys the aftermath. He looks at his men, the survivors, many of whom are tending to the wounded or preparing the dead for burial. He sees their faces, tired, bloodied, but resolute. They may have been only 300, but their actions have forever altered the course of history. This will be remembered, Bertrand whispers to himself, though he knows the men will not boast about their victory. The Crusaders are not here for glory. They are here to fight, to survive, and, in the case of this battle, to redefine the possible. Their victory over the vast Seljuk army, a force 10 times their size, will be sung about in the years to come. But the men who fought it will remain humble, unwilling to let their success cloud the mission ahead. In the days that follow, word spreads. Messengers carry news of the battle's outcome to the Crusader states, and soon all of Christendom will know the story of how a small group of 300 knights, against all odds, struck fear into one of the largest military forces in the world. The Seljuks, who had believed their dominance unchallenged, are now forced to rethink their strategies and their plans. Yet Bertrand's mind is already on the next move. This victory was a spark, a fire that could ignite the course of the Crusades, but it is not the end. The Crusaders know they must continue the fight to secure their place in this foreign land. What they have accomplished here is just a chapter, not the final one. As the Crusaders prepare to move on, Bertrand looks out over the battlefield one last time. The Seljuk army is defeated, but the landscape has changed. A new legacy has been forged in the heat of battle, and though the 300 may never see the full impact of their actions, their legacy will endure. History will remember them, not for their numbers, but for the sheer will, the brilliance, and the courage that turned the tide in the face of impossible odds. What do you think would have happened if the Crusaders had failed? Would history have been different? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that will make you rethink history.